Thank you very much. Hi everyone, and thanks very much for coming and welcome to the session. Hope we're going to bring you a bit of kind of hope and inspiration for the coming months and the future. I'm just going to introduce you to our fantastic panelists. On my left, as you're looking at the screen, is Stuart Thomas. Stuart is the jobs board manager at Cision, which is one of the biggest sort of media PR intelligence engagement organizations in the country, and he knows an awful lot about the jobs and where they are and where they aren't and how to get them. On my right, there's Jem. Jem is the founder and director and editor of Journo Resources, which is a very brilliant online site she set up to help young people at entry level know everything that they need to know about the industry. And then next to Jem, there's Sue Ryan. Sue heads up the Daily Mail graduate trainee scheme, which, as you can imagine, is one of the most competitive schemes in the country. And she knows a thing or two about what makes people stand out and how people kind of thrive and survive in the early stages of their career in a very tough media environment. And she's also herself a very senior journalist. She's held down some really senior jobs in newsrooms and has been very much a trailblazer, I think, for her generation. So we're going to start off just chatting amongst our panel. You've sent in some really great questions, so I've filleted those a bit, and we'll pick up on some of the themes that you've sent in, and then in about half an hour we'll open up to you, and we'll ask you some of the questions that you've asked for you to put to the panel. So I'm going to start off with Stuart and ask him to talk a little bit about what kind of jobs are around there traditionally at entry level, how those have been changing over the last few years, how things are looking at the moment. I know it's not going to be very cheering news, but you know, we're all in the same boat here. Everybody, whether you're entry level or very senior, is taking a pay cut or being furloughed or being laid off. So, you know, you're not alone if you're anxious and worried, if that's any help. Anyway, over to Stuart, and then we'll ask Jem the same thing.
Thanks, Hilly. As you say, at the moment, job numbers are down, but you know, this is to be expected, and things will improve. And as you say, Cision Jobs carries jobs from all sectors, B2B, B2C, news, all sectors you can think of, from all levels. And you know, traditionally, we've always, well, since the days of Gorkana, we've been closely involved with journalism. And through that network, we've got various alerts and systems that help people keep in touch with the latest jobs. As I was saying, things will certainly improve at the moment from where they are currently. But yeah, it'll be an interesting future, and I think it'll be a bright one, but it'll take us a little while to get there. So yeah.
And could you say a little bit more about, you know, on balance, when in normal times, what sort of percentage of jobs are in which sectors? Are there more jobs in digital? Are there more jobs in consumer, in B2B? How does it look?
It's a fairly even split, actually. B2C, B2B, and then news are our main sectors. And then within those, obviously, you've got all your leisure pursuits and your various professional interests. Interestingly, Politico are actually recruiting at the moment. They're one of the few people who are making a shout about it. So some B2C titles are certainly still recruiting. And I think there'll be a rise in B2C and digital, certainly as we come out of lockdown. There'll be a thirst for content, I think, particularly for people whose leisure pursuits have dried up. They'll be really wanting to get as much content as they can get hold of. So I think that'll be a positive thing that'll come out of this. And digital is so immediate as well. It's straight to the consumer, straight to the website. So yeah, you know, I think digital will be on the rise. We work with content marketing agencies as well, so they're not always traditional journalism jobs. They're to do with selling things and telling stories about selling things as well, but it's still storytelling, but in just different forms.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thanks, Jem. What can you add to that from the sort of entry level area that you know so much about, where to look and how to find things?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, it'd be wrong to say that things haven't gone down a little bit recently. But what I would say is, part of what we do at Journo Resources, we don't just kind of put up our own jobs that we advertise. We kind of scour the internet for more. And I definitely say that over the last couple of weeks, things have picked up a little bit slightly. So there's definitely a little bit of optimism, I think, to take from that, because as we all hear far too much anyway, there is kind of this idea of the new normal or whatever. So people are kind of, to a certain extent, more willing to carry on and hire at the moment. So there definitely is more out there than there was a couple of weeks ago. And I think it's also just a little bit about kind of widening your net. I think maybe 2 months ago, it would have been enough to just look at one jobs board and go, okay, there's a load of opportunities here, which ones potentially fit me? But now I think it's a case of actually having to delve a bit deeper. There are opportunities out there, you've just got to do a bit more digging. So making sure that you're looking across all of the jobs boards, making sure that you're kind of looking on social media, signed up to newsletters, going to employers directly. So I think there is stuff out there, it's just, you might need to be a bit more proactive to find it.
Okay, and apart from the brilliant Cision and Journo Resources jobs boards, where else would you suggest a good places to look?
So without being too promotional, we've actually got a big list actually which we've put together of on Journo Resources about 60 different job sites. But off the top of my head, there's other places include journalism.co.uk, Hold the Front Page, Press Gazette, all kind of other journalism ones that you might have heard of. There's a good website called Media Beans, which is run by just an individual who again just goes around and collates, and they send out on a Monday. You can go to employers' websites directly, so places like the BBC, ITV, all of those big employers, News UK, will all have kind of their own hub. And then even just like a little bit more tangentially, you can look at places like charityjobs.co.uk, because a lot of charities will also be looking for people who have skills in storytelling or kind of PR kind of roles. And so even in other kind of sector specific places, you can also find jobs where it's maybe not like a complete package of a journalism job, but you're doing 90% of it, and then you could potentially move on to something else a little bit later.
You can also join groups on LinkedIn and things like that as well, specific to the area that you want to get into with the hashtag that you're looking for. So that's a good way to have those jobs find you. But as Jem says, if you can find a decent newsletter source or jobs by email service, you set that profile up a few times on a few places, and those jobs will come to you by email, which is a nice way to do it. It means you don't have to keep visiting those websites week in, week out. Those are recommended routes for sure.
I think that's really super useful advice. Thanks. So if at the moment people are wondering, I've got this time on my hands, what could I do with it? I think signing up for these newsletters, I mean, the Cision jobs newsletter is brilliant, so is the Journo Resources one. Jem's mentioned other outfits like Media Beans and so on. There are for freelancers, there's Freelance Fields, isn't there, Jem? If you're interested in trying to do some freelance work and pitching. So, spending a bit of time researching how to get hold of this information, I think would be a really good investment at the moment.
Just to pick up really quickly, Hilly, you mentioned freelancing. Like, if you can't find a job right now, there's nothing to stop you like putting out some pitches. And like you just said, there are even more freelance newsletters where they do calls for pitches than there are necessarily like jobs ones. So there's nothing to stop you right now jumping in and kind of sending off some pitches and doing that if you are a final year student who's about to graduate.
We did have quite a few questions actually about pitching, but we're going to steer clear of that a little bit this week, because we have done a session like this on Zoom with Donna Ferguson, who's on our committee and is a very successful freelance journalist, and she has a great workshop that she does called How to Write the Perfect Pitch. So if you weren't at that one, because it was so oversubscribed and it's so good, we're going to run it again next week. So keep your eye open and sign up for the How to Write the Perfect Pitch workshop with online workshop with Donna. Anyway, Sue, let's go on to you. How's the world looking from your point of view at the Daily Mail?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I should probably say I don't actually work for the Daily Mail. I run the Trainee scheme. So I don't have any inside knowledge as to, what the paper sales are or directions or whatever. I mean, I specifically run the scheme and not much else. But having said that, any conversations I've had, and I've had a few recently in the last week or so, and they're all pretty optimistic. I mean, we were just talking earlier, I think the papers are looking fantastic. I can't believe how with so many people working from home, the papers are just so good. And I think they're pretty healthy, they're pretty pleased with the numbers, and Mail in particularly is well placed because it's got Mail Plus. Mail Online is very different from the Daily Mail, and talk about digital and print, and I think there are horses for courses, and you should go for the one that suits you. But the one thing you need more than anything else when you're applying is to understand what it is you're applying for, and understand what the paper is, what it's trying to do, and so you need to read it. So the thing you should be doing in this particular period is reading lots of papers and getting to be familiar with them. So if you do get an interview, you're much better placed, to write your CV. You're better placed to write a cover letter. You just need to know what it is you're dealing with.
So you must
going ahead with the scheme. It's very difficult to know the timing on that. We're doing second stage at the moment, and there's a lot of enthusiasm for having a new set of trainees. My concern would be that the starting date in September, if we think there's going to be a second peak, one of the things is you need to have a period of training. I don't know how many of you know how the Mail scheme works, but we train you for a month in a sort of classroom situation, but you're still not ready to go straight into national newspapers. So we then send you out to work on regional papers, or the Scottish Daily Mail, or Irish Daily Mail, and things like that. And that is, they've got to be in a position to be able to take the trainees for 3 or 4 months. So we'll just watch it. So I think we'll choose our candidates. We'll send out contracts, but we might have to move the start date.
So you must read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of application letters, covering letters, and CVs. What makes people stand out, or what puts you right off from the get-go?
Mistakes, copy and pasting CVs. I get an awful lot of letters, which say, I think I'd be really good fit for the Daily Express. Well, my answer is go and apply to the Daily Express. We're not, you have to be accurate. You have to feel as though this is the job you really want. So you have to show a little bit of understanding of the paper. The cover letter, probably 4 or 5 paragraphs at most, and very sort of simple and straightforward. Cover letters, sometimes they go on for like 3 pages, and they, every sentence starts with furthermore. Who uses the word furthermore? Do it concisely and friendly, and enough information to get a sort of sense of who you are, but also the fact you can pick out the important bits, that it's not a big waffle. So I would say the cover letter is very important, although it's very short. You should do whatever's asked. We ask for 3 cuttings. The number of people that send me 10 cuttings. Look at what is asked and supply it. CVs, I look for, we like to have some formal journalism training, so it doesn't have to be a master's, but an NCTJ, a fast track. Occasionally we do, every year we normally take maybe 1 or 2 who haven't got that, who are very impressive, and particularly sub-editors we take, because I don't think it's quite so important. Sub-editors, either you've got, good grammar, language, and all of those things, or you haven't, and we can train you a newspaper writing style. But it's just important to show on your CV that you haven't just woken up that morning and decided you wanted to be a national newspaper reporter. There is, if somebody's edited a student paper, they immediately stand out because they didn't just dabble a bit and write the odd article, but they were obviously very immersed in it, and quite often for those people it was the major part of their university career. But we also do a digital course, and that one starts in March. So in fact, for the people I'm talking to at the moment, that is one that you should look out for, because we probably won't start recruiting until December. And we normally take on about 12 digital journalists. And again, it's a very good scheme.
Great, thank you. That was sort of great tips. Can I just ask one more thing, because that's come up in the questions that we had. Do put questions on the chat, by the way, if you want to. That's absolutely fine. We'll keep an eye on the chat, everyone. So if there's something you want to put up there, we'll be looking at it. So just what makes the difference, really? I think you've implied. Is it the grades? How good your degree is, or are you really much more?
No, it's not grades. I would say, and this is difficult because you've got to get to the interview to be able to show it. But I think journalism is what, 35% skill and 65% attitude, and so it's all about that attitude of, this is the job I really want. It's you're prepared to work hard, you're prepared to put your social life on hold, and it's not right for everyone. And if I get a CV and you haven't been in a newsroom, I mean, how do you know you're going to like it? So it is important to show on your CV that you've been in a newsroom, and you know what you're letting yourself in for, and you like the idea of it.
Okay, that's brilliant. Jem and Stuart, have you got any more to add to that? Because you see loads of applications and yourselves, and talk to employers a lot. Any more tips about actually getting somebody to notice you?
I think, as Sue touched on, the cover letter shouldn't be overly long and waffly. It should demonstrate your interest and your desire and your qualifications to get yourself in to interview. Also, the CV, ideally, it should be just 2 sides, so it can be printed on one sheet of A4 paper. Therefore, if it gets dropped, you'll see your bits of your CV will never get lost. It's on a single piece of paper. And I try and perhaps have different CVs for your different specialties or the ideal job that you want to get. So you've got a tailored cover letter, a template, which you always make sure you personalise to that job, and perhaps a couple of different CVs that suit the sorts of your ideal roles that you want to go for.
Great, thank you. Jen?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to I know that it always sounds really obvious, I think, when you come to a careers panel and people are saying make sure you've checked your spelling, and make sure you've kind of tweaked everything and haven't done anything silly or said that you're applying to the wrong paper and stuff. But I really can't stress enough how many applications I've personally looked through where people have done that kind of thing. The last time I hired for a role for Journo Resources, 10% of people spelled my name wrong, and as much as I think I try to be a fairly forgiving person, at the end of the day is you have to remember that all of these people who are looking through your work are just a very busy person in a newsroom who has a lot to do, and they have to make decisions very quickly. And even if the best case scenario, you've got 2 equally competent applicants, but you need to decide between them and one of them has made a bit of an error, that really does stand out. And I think the other couple of things I would say is just to really put your head in the mindset of how you're there to help that editor or help that person hiring, because I see a lot of cover letters where it's I would like to do this and this would be a great job for me because this will help me get to this in 10 years time, whereas actually you've got to remember that I'm not necessarily interested in that aspect of why this job is good for you. I'm looking for you to help me and fill a role and fill those skills. So really always come at it from a sense of how can you help this person and make it really easy for them. And finally, I think 99% of people just genuinely don't go that extra 1%. So do think about how whatever way it is, how can you stand out? How can you make your application really top notch? Because most people genuinely won't. And even if you're putting together less applications, but you're doing them better, I think that's a much stronger way to do it.
Great, thank you. And I don't know if any of my students are here from London College of Communication, but I'm just very glad to hear that stuff about not making mistakes, because it's not just me who says it, okay? Okay, so can we just talk a little bit about internships? and work experience. Presumably it's not a great time for either of those, but Jem, I think I have seen remote internships popping up on Journo resources. Is that right?
Yeah, there's been a few, like kind of as Stuart and I were saying earlier, it's had a bit of obviously a massive drop, but things are kind of popping up again. And so I think it is just a case of having a real dig around. And also, if you are in that position where you've had something, say, lined up that's been dropped, I would definitely say, like, you know, if you don't ask, you don't get. There might be, especially if you've already got that contact there and you were due to do an internship or work experience, you know, ask if there's any possibility of doing something remotely. Could you still send them some ideas? So I think they will start to come through. There's not masses at the moment, but I do think if you do cast your net wide and kind of really think of what contacts you've got, maybe you want to send in some ideas first, there's definitely stuff to be found.
I think it's a good idea to contact your regional papers, actually, because a lot of them have had to furlough staff, but they're still coming out and they've still got the website. So you know, if you are in a position to provide material for them, you know, not unpaid, I'm afraid, but I think they're pretty open to wanting copy. And you've all got stories, you know, you're all talking to people, you're all doing presumably lots of Zoom chats, and that's where all these stories come out of. And so local papers particularly, you know, want to hear that.
Right, okay. Stuart, you've got any thoughts on internships and?
Well, a lot of them traditionally start in the summer months, so those are on hold, I think, for the moment for a lot of publishers. But they will come back, and as Jem said, just because you can't see them being advertised at the moment doesn't mean they're not still looking for bright young things to apply to them. So I would certainly apply to my local paper and to the traditional major schemes, in the hope that it might come online sooner than people think, and you've got your foot in the door there.
Okay, great. And can we just chat a little bit about you know, if you've already got a job, or you've got your foot in the door and you're thinking of making your next move, any advice there? You know, you've already got stuff on your CV, you've got some work to show for yourself. Any tips about moving on, or moving from one sector, moving from B to B into mainstream news or whatever?
I think now's not a bad time to look at specialising, or a second specialty perhaps, to widen your net and to add another string to your bow perhaps. So, you know, decide on the sector that you want to move to and really get yourself into it now. Start writing pieces and pitching articles, and just go for it based on the specialties you really want to focus on.
I think when I was first starting out, one of the worries I really had was that you'd kind of get boxed into a certain area. So my first job was as a broadcast journalist for a local TV station, and I think I was incredibly worried that I would be, you know, stood on pavements in the rain forever doing pieces to camera. Thankfully, I'm not. I'm inside my house now. It does look like it's going to rain. But I guess what I would say is, we've touched on this a little bit before, but you know, journalism is very interchangeable, and there are always going to be things that you can pull on. So I think when you are really personalising that job application, which you should do every time, like you shouldn't be sending that, you know, CV that's the same, or that cover letter that's the same. It should be personalised every time. But when you are doing it, I think like it sometimes is it sounds stupid, but it is as granular as like getting a highlighter out, working out what they want, and there will be points from your previous jobs where you do hit those boxes. So it's just really thinking about what transferable skills that you have from before that you can pull through.
I think it might be good now to actually, just one more thing. I mean, it's been some very helpful tips, I think, about you know, really exploring how to find out what's going on through jobs boards, through email, letters, that kind of thing. Anything else that people could be doing if they've got time on their hands to improve their skills or to develop a specialism?
Yeah, okay, I'll take that one then. I guess the main thing, I mean, what I'm looking for when I'm high, especially, I guess this is maybe most relevant to entry level if it's your first job. I think I'm just looking for people that have done something. Like, I'm not necessarily, you know, as bothered if it's a blog that's been read by 5 people or 200 people or whatever, but like, just really use it. Maybe you've had this idea of a feature knocking around in your head, and even if you only post it on Medium, like, that's fine, but just actually just using the time to do something. If you want to try out a different like style of writing, you've wanted to do something theatre reviews, for example. All of the theatres are streaming stuff for free now. So just if there's ever been something that you thought, oh, I've really wanted to try that, but I was a bit too scared, I think now's the time to make your podcast or start your Instagram channel or kind of upskill in some way.
There's something else I'd like to touch on. When I go, the Mail is very, very keen on diversity. And when I start talking to, like went to Cardiff University to their journalism course, and I said, oh, we're very keen. And he said, you're 100th in the queue. Every newspaper, every media outlet at the moment is looking for strong, diverse candidates. And it's a real plus if you are. And I think, you need to point that out in your cover letter, because, otherwise how do you know? And I do think there are a lot of opportunities for diverse students.
That's really, really good point. Thank you. Okay, Jem, should we open up to some of the questions that have come in from our guests?
Yeah, I'm going to take some from the chat first. I feel like this one might be I think we'll probably all be on the same page here, but it'll be interesting to see what Sue and Stuart think as well. So we've got a question from Emily Horner. You should be able to chat now. You had a question about kind of whether you can ever kind of replace your CV with other things. I'm not sure if you've unmuted or not. Well, I'll ask the question for you, and just whether the rest of the panel think that you can ever attach just your LinkedIn profile instead of having a CV. I don't know whether Sue and Stuart have any thoughts on that.
There's been some talk in job boards about making applications that are without a cover letter and with a basic standard template. I think for something that involves writing and demonstrating skill in writing, this is a really, really bad idea. The first opportunity you've got to demonstrate some skill in writing is with your cover letter. If that's taken away, or if you just put a link to your LinkedIn profile, I wouldn't want to do that as a writer. I think that'd be the worst thing for me personally. So I don't think it's a good idea, and I think that personalised touch is still required.
Yeah, I agree completely with Stuart. I mean, I think it just looks lazy, actually. It's supposed to be personal. It's supposed to be one-to-one. So, if I'm reading the same stuff as that you're sending to, I don't know, a B2B or a charity, how can you make it directed at me?
Yeah, for sure, I agree. I think like if you're my personal view as well is if you are putting in a job application, you really do want to personalise it, and you're just kind of throwing away that opportunity if you're not. We're going to go to another Emily now. Hopefully we should be able to, yes, Emily, you should be able to chat now.
Hello, thank you very much. This is really helpful. So one of my questions is that when I've been applying for both jobs and internships and graduate schemes, the emphasis is on experience. They want you to have experience in newsrooms and things. But the problem with that is, how do you get the experience if when you apply to different newsrooms, they want you to have experience? So it's sort of chicken and egg scenario, that you need someone to sort of give you a chance. And then you can obviously say, go to like the Telegraph or the Times or the Daily Mail and say, I have this experience. So how does one get over that obstacle?
I think I think at this particular time, and it's the one thing I've been most aware of and felt most sympathy actually for students at the moment, that clearly you can't do work experience in newsrooms. My own experience for people getting work experience, they're not asking for it's usually a sort of slightly formatted, somebody in a newspaper office is dealing with internships and placements. The Mail is not easy to get work experience with, partly because it's a very well-resourced paper. So unlike some of the other papers, it is not looking for cheap free labour at all. So and it tends, unfortunately, the Mail to be a little bit based on, if you've got a contact somewhere. But the managing editor's office does deal with it, and the sports people have a system where they have work experience people in every week, and there's a rota, and they'll book you in for 6 months' time, And as far as I know, they're not asking for any other experience. They just, because the whole point about work experience is to go in and find out whether you like it. It's not it's not really to build on other work experience. So I'm disappointed to hear you say that, because I'd not been aware of that.
Okay. Jem, Stuart, you got anything to add to that about this sort of catch-22 of, well, how can I get some experience if I can't get any experience?
Yeah, you go.
No, after you, Jem.
Yeah, I think
you've been through it personally. So yeah.
I think you hear people talk about this kind of thing a lot, and I think it definitely does feel like a bit of a catch-22, because you even see it in, there's really entry-level kind of job specs. But I think it's just about having the confidence to know that experience doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have been paid or have been in a newsroom. Kind of what I was saying earlier about when you're moving from, a different sector within journalism, there will always be things that you can draw on. So it's just about thinking about what other things you have done which you can kind of clock up as experience. So I'd always say, from a student perspective, to give you an example, stuff that you've done for the student newspaper, or maybe when you volunteered for places, or there's a lot of different alternative things that you can do that you can clock up as an experience. Or even if it's something that you've done in a part-time job in an unrelated field, there's normally things that you can kind of draw in. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that you've had that kind of couple of months in a newsroom, but there's always kind of strands you can pull, and just have the confidence to say, okay, I have had experience of this because I've done X, and this is why you should consider me.
Jem, there's a question that's come up about, maybe Sue could answer it, about how jobs on national newspapers are very rarely advertised. So, why is this, and what are your tips?
Well, yes, jobs on newspapers tend to be done through, because somebody knows somebody, they've seen your work, they've met you, they've worked with you. And actually that's one of my tips, was when you are getting your first jobs, be very careful not to alienate the people around you, because they are the people that are going to offer you the next job. I mean, I had one interview for a job when I left university, and that was for a regional paper. And I never, ever had another interview. And I did 8, 9, 10 national paper jobs. And it's all to do with people you've worked with, who then call you in. So yeah, it is they don't advertise, because they know what they want and they know what they're looking for. And, I had a call this week, the Daily Mail looking for somebody, and they said, is there anybody? So it's who you come across. And I often say to the people I interview that, and don't get the jobs, you're on my radar now. And quite often somebody asks me, do you know anybody that can work in the travel department or something? And somebody who was absolutely not right for to be a news reporter would be perfect for that job. So it's very much about contacts rather than cold answering an ad, and that's why getting the first job is the hardest one, I promise you. Once you've got your first job, things open up, and I guess with me, if I have any sort of regrets, it's I never sort of dictated my own career, because somebody said, do you want this job? And I'd say, oh yes please, and I'd just keep moving like that. So you need to think about what the job is you want, and make a sort of determined effort to get all the right background for that, and make the right contacts for it.
And any advice on, I mean, obviously Women in Journalism is a network, and we have lots of events which are a great way, in the real world, for people to meet each other and make contacts. Any ideas about how to go about that when you can't physically go to a seminar or a workshop or a party? Jem, have you got any tips on sort of online networking, contact making?
Yeah, for sure. I think the one thing I'd add as well on this whole kind of like closed network thing is that you know, there are obviously, unfortunately, jobs that are kind of depending on who you know, but I do think, you know, there are a decent amount which are still out there. I think Cision have got a decent amount listed at the moment. You've got the job from the Sunday Times. I've seen stuff from metro.co.uk, and there's quite a lot of places that, you know, will put stuff out there. I think it's just maybe a case of, to a certain extent, having to kind of make your expectations realistic. I think it's very unrealistic that you're going to kind of waltz straight in to work on a national news desk as your first job. So I think that's why you perhaps don't see as many kind of come and be a junior reporter at the Times or the Mail kind of things. But in terms of networking kind of remotely, I mean, there are a lot of kind of networks like Women in Journalism. They're all kind of doing things like this. News Associates are also putting together some really good kind of online webinars. So I think using those as an excuse to kind of like anything which gives you a personal connection to talk to someone. So if you watch a journalist from the Express doing a talk, and then you've then got something to follow up with them in an email or a DM later, so you can actually say, oh, I saw your kind of chat for News Associates, it's really interesting, I wondered if we could chat on the phone, and kind of taking it that way. So always having a bit of a personal kind of approach, and kind of using this time where we're all actually are online and all doing events to kind of be able to pop in and see as many things as you can, really.
Okay, great. Stuart, you got anything to add about the whole sort of the world of social media and networking and making contacts?
Well, LinkedIn and Twitter are always worth looking at for your special interests and journalists that you follow. You know, you can get into some Twitter chats. They occasionally have Q&As on Twitter where you can get involved with people. So certainly check out the social networks that you're part of and use those hashtags and see what other people are talking about within those areas.
Just clarify, when I said it's can I clarify that when I said it's people you know, I don't mean it's nepotism. I don't mean it's friends. I don't mean it's you know, it's very much not actually. It's just that you know, I remember talking to City, and there was one student sitting at the front who was just something about him. He's very attentive, and then somebody else from the Mail went to talk to City, and they said, oh, you know, met this guy, and I you know, think he'd be good, and it was Andrew Pierce, and Andrew Pierce forgot to put the name of the student in my email, and I knew he was talking about John Stevens. I just knew he was, you know, and it's something about just making an impression, you know, whenever you're in the company of other journalists, just make that impression. And John Stevens is now deputy political editor of the Mail, and he was always going to be a huge success. And it's very odd how you can just spot it in a room full of 40 people, you know.
One of the things too that we haven't discussed is the idea of having a mentor. I run the mentoring scheme at Women in Journalism. We mentor 100 women a year at various levels, and I mean, some of you may be on the scheme. And when I was looking at the questions earlier, a lot of at the time I was thinking, God, this person could really do with having a mentor, because they're asking the kind of questions that a mentor, somebody a bit older, a bit more experienced, who's, you know, suffered some of the kind of slings and arrows that journalism chucks at you, can help you with, and some of the kind of personal issues that might be holding you back. So you know, there are several of those around. Our applications will be up again in December. We run the scheme for a year from January. So, you know, keep an eye open for that too, because just even a few chats a year with some. I mean, Jem is being mentored now by Jane Martinson. Is that right? The Guardian columnist.
Yeah, and it's really great. We got a coffee in just before lockdown. So but yeah, definitely would echo everything you're saying about looking out for those opportunities. There's a really good one actually if you are actually working in the industry. I think it's called Digital Women Leaders. So if you are already working in a job, it's not like a formal networking scheme, but you can just book one-off slots with women who are kind of in the industry. So if you haven't managed to get onto one of those mentoring schemes, or you're waiting for the Women in Journalism one to come round, that's quite a good one to look at.
Sometimes it's a bit of a slow burn. I actually got an email from Becky Barrow, the news editor of the Sunday Times, last week, saying how pleased she was. And this was a mentee I had about 4 years ago, the first year of the scheme, whenever that was. and it, you know, it took a couple of years to try and get her placed somewhere, and she's doing, you know, lots of shifts now, and they think she's brilliant. And so it doesn't happen necessarily, you know, straight away, but it's a terrific scheme.
Okay. I've just noticed too, Jem, there's a question about, we've been chatting a lot about news, but what if you want to get into features? I mean, my feeling there, having been a features editor for years and years and years, is that on the whole, getting a job as a staff feature writer on a newspaper or a magazine is like gold dust. Very few people actually ever get to that sort of level. You have to be really, really good, and you have to have sort of earned your stripes. I mean, to me, my advice there would be just keep pitching. You know, come to the pitching session next week. Just keep chucking your ideas at places where you would really like to see them printed. But would anybody agree or disagree with that, or add anything?
I think there are various routes into feature departments, and one of them actually is often being a sub-editor. I mean, we also do a sub-editing trainee program, and an awful lot of our former trainees are executives in feature departments, and that's quite a good route in.
That's how I started doing subbing shifts at the Times. That was my foot in the door to features. Yeah, and I think sub-editing is something that people don't really talk about very much certainly on university degrees. But if you really love language and you love words and you love grammar and you're quite well organised and got an eye for detail, it's a great way in, and it's very adaptable. You know, you can move around from one place to the next and work your way up the sort of production side of things. Yeah. Okay, Jem, have you spotted any more questions, or is there anything?
Yeah, I'm going to try and go to Erin now, who had a question. Erin, you should be able to speak. I haven't muted you. I'm not sure whereabouts you are in our. Hello. No. All right. Well, I'll ask the question. Myself. Basically, it's just around if anyone had any ideas around making that transition from doing a lot of unpaid work to actually kind of, you know, being a freelancer or charging for your time, or kind of, you know, just basically making that step from unpaid to paid. If anyone had any advice on that. I've just seen that the mic is broken. That's why. I don't know if you had anything, Hilly, that you normally say to your students.
Sorry, I've actually been looking at the chat. I wasn't paying attention. Naughty me. Sorry.
That's all right. No, the question was just about how you make that jump from unpaid work to paid work, as a kind of when you kind of start thinking of yourself as either a freelancer or, you know, think that you should start getting paid.
Yeah, I think that's very tricky. I mean, I think you know, if you keep working for free all the time, you're on a bit of a hiding to nothing. But I think one of the things that comes up over and over again, I think particularly in women in journalism, I don't know if it's a sort of women problem, is that often, you know, people don't get paid for things, so they don't really ask, or they don't know how much is the right thing, to the right amount to ask for. So, you know, finding out a little bit more about that. I mean, on Journo Resources, you've got brilliant stuff on, you know, what rates are for different types of gigs, whether it's subbing shifts or writing shifts or lineage if you're freelance, being paid by the word. But you know, I know it sounds it's a bit brutal, but if you don't ask, you don't get. So we had some great advice in a session a few weeks ago from Louise Court, who worked for years and years at Hearst at a very senior level and now runs her own consultancy company. And one of the things that she recommended was, you know, if you get offered a certain amount for something and you think, God, it's just not worth it, I can't do that, you know, this is going to take me a long time, is to say, well, if that's what your budget is, if that's what you've got, that's fine, but, you know, this is what I could do for that amount of money, you know, would that be okay? So you're not saying no to the work and no to the money, you're negotiating, basically. So just being a bit, you know, what's the worst thing that can happen if you ask for some money? Somebody's going to say no. You know, it's not the end of the world. You know, worse things happen. Sorry, Sue.
I think you need to look at where the pendulum is. Are you, I mean, who's getting the most out of the experience? If you're going into a newspaper for 2 weeks to just absorb and try and learn a lot, then you're probably getting more out of it than they are. When that 2 weeks is over, and if they want you back, it's because they're getting, you know, they think you could be useful to them. And at that point, you should definitely be paid. So don't let yourself go on doing, you know, masses of work experience unpaid, because it's it's not right, and B, most organizations can afford, you know, it might not be a lot of money, but most organizations can afford it. So if you're being useful to them, they need to pay for it.
And also, you know, if you're talking, that's really important advice, I think, is not to go on working somewhere for free, you know, forever. And if it's freelance, if you're writing stuff for free, then, you know, if you're using that as examples of your work, there's no need to tell anybody that you weren't paid for it. You know, don't always sort of do yourself down and say, you know, the things about you that might be perceived as negative. You know, nobody's going to promote or be as interested in your career as you are. You know, it's hard, but that's what you have to learn, really. You have to put a lot of the effort in yourself, and don't again do what I think, from my experience of women in journalism, is a very sort of girly thing, and say, oh well, you know, I wasn't, you know, this wasn't very good, and I didn't get paid for it, and I didn't stay very long. You know, don't do yourself down, don't talk yourself down.
Cool. We had quite a couple of questions in around salaries and stuff. So, Amy, I'm going to come to you now. You just popped a question in the chat. I don't know if you wanted to ask it aloud.
Hi. Yeah. My question is just related to when you're, as an entry-level journalist, when you apply for somewhere and they ask you what your salary expectation is, I find it really hard to judge what the right amount to put is and know where you're meant to base this off. And also, especially in the current climate, should we maybe lower our salary expectations if we're applying for jobs?
Good questions. I mean, Sue, what do you think about that? You've probably got a good idea of entry-level salaries.
It's a slightly weird question to ask you, actually. Most people, if they've got a job, they know what the salary is. Further up the ladder, you know, when you're, you know, quite well known and you're moving from one paper to another, you might make a demand. But I, you know, I think that that you should throw it back at them, really, and say, well, you know, what are the salary? What are you looking at? I think if they say that, they may be wondering if they can get you for cheaper than, you know, they'll know what the budget was. If they've advertised for this job, they know what the budget is, and you need to ask them what it is. Throw it back.
Yeah, what would you say there? You've got some pretty good insight into salaries and rates of pay.
I'd say it's a tricky one. A lot of recruiters don't publish that. I would say certainly don't lower your rate in the current climate. I'd say you're worth what you're worth, regardless. But it is difficult. I mean, not all publishers do display their salaries, but those that do, I would use that as a baseline and ask the question. Well, certainly it shouldn't be the first question you ask, but once you're into the process, you'll have an idea, and you know you should have an idea of what other employers are looking to pay. Bear in mind, if it's London waiting, all these sorts of things, it'll be different outside of London as well. But yeah, I certainly wouldn't say lower your expectations. I wouldn't do that personally. Value yourself for sure.
I think entry level in London is probably around 25,000. But you actually find that in the regions it's less than that.
Yeah, I could talk about salaries all day, mainly because as Stuart says, like there is this kind of whole idea of, you know, quite a lot of places don't list the salary for some reason, which, as Sue says, is a little bit ridiculous because they know how much they want to hire you for. I think, so I've just put a link into the chat, which is a page that we have. We're due to be relaunching it at the end of the month, so it should be a lot more populated, but there's just some general kind of pointers in there where people have told us how much they've been paid. I think also just looking around at what similar kind of jobs what similar kind of jobs kind of pay, I think will give you a bit of a steer as well. And just asking around, I think one of the most valuable things that we perhaps don't talk about enough is just the cohort that you have around you. So if you've got a network of people that are either people that you studied with or people you did a student newspaper with or all of that kind of stuff, asking those kind of people, because I think that network of people that go up alongside you, it's acceptable to kind of ask them those questions, and that's kind of even more valuable than saying having people in your network that maybe like the editor of the Times or whatever.
Okay. Any more questions there popping up?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to concentrate on questions. Anne.
Yeah.
I saw one from Melissa.
While I just while I work out where we are, I had a question earlier that I was going to read out for someone, just around kind of that idea, how to keep your confidence up in the face of rejection. So I don't know if Hilly or Sue or Stuart had anything to kind of add to that one. If you are kind of getting yourself knocked back, how to keep yourself going.
I think,
go on, Sue.
I mean, I remember Satnam Sangara, who hopefully most of you will read, brilliant writer in the Times, and he was at the FT before. I remember him saying that he wrote 200 letters when he left university trying to get a job. So, brilliant people can get rejected. I mean, J.K. Rowling got rejected from a lot of publishers before it was. So I think you need to work out whether you're being rejected, just because there's so much noise going out there and you just, haven't been selected. Or is there something wrong with your CV? Is there something missing? Are you applying for the right jobs that fits with what you want to do and what your CV is offering? Look at it and see if this is a good match, really.
Yeah, and I think too that there's just sort of an element of luck in all these things. Sometimes it's just you're the right person in the right time. It's the right fit. They're what you're looking for. I think what I'd encourage people to do is not to take things too personally. Not. I mean, Sue's absolutely right. You need to be realistic about whether your CV needs another look, or whether your heart is really in this job and your application's convincing, obviously. But it may just be that it's not personal. You don't know what's going on inside the organisation. There might be all sorts of internal things going on where there's an internal candidate who's very strong, but they have to advertise the job, that kind of stuff. So I think you just have to kind of, again, start growing your rhino hide and try and sort of bounce back and be resilient and keep trying. And as Sue says, these things don't sort of land on a plate for anybody. They never have, and I don't think they ever will. Jem, Michelle Edwards wants to ask a question.
Yeah, it's about pitching. So shall I put it through?
Well, we would really love you to come to the pitching session next week, Michelle, if you can, because that will be specifically about pitching. We have run a pitching session already. Would that be okay? Or if you can't come next week, is that a problem? Where is she? Are you there, Michelle?
Hang on.
Can you unmute her?
Yeah, for sure.
Hi. Would you be able to come, Michelle, next week to the pitching session?
Yeah, the thing is, though, I'm not sure what happens when you when I type a question. It's not so much a pitching question. It's just a generic question which is related to everything else. Because
okay, go ahead.
Apologies, I thought it was. Sorry, I'm juggling quite a lot with the spreadsheet. So sorry if they're all a bit in the wrong order. But I had got you down to something that was related to pitching. So my apologies if not.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, hi everyone, and thanks for the Zoom call. What it is I'm kind of desperate to get this question answered, if you like. So basically what it is, I've got a great idea for a new and regular column. I know exactly which publication I want to pitch it to, but I've been procrastinating for quite some time. And the reason being is that I'm really kind of reserved about making contact with an editor that I don't know as an unknown freelancer who isn't on his or her radar. Because previously I've had a pitch and a pitch rejected, and then it was given to a staffer. So what advice would you give me for that? Because obviously on the one hand I'm really keen to get it out there, and on the other hand I don't want to go through what I went through before, which was a rejection, only to find out that it had been given to a staffer because I'm not known to that editor stroke publication.
Okay, well, I mean, two things. I think the really good thing that's great about your pitch is that it's for a particular slot for a particular publication. So presumably you've been reading that a lot. You
Yes.
really like it.
Yeah.
So that, that's hugely in your favour, because you'd be amazed at how many people pitch stuff like that when, it isn't really the right thing, or it's very obvious to the commissioning editor that they haven't really been understanding what's wanted. So that's great. So I mean, I would just go ahead and do it. She's not going to know, or he's not going to know that you've got this fantastic idea unless you pitch it to them. There's no two ways about that. And then just about the thing of, you sent in something and then the idea was given to somebody else on the staff. I think maybe it was, but I think again, it's this thing of, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes there, especially with ideas that are very topical. They're very sort of the moment, they're in the ether. So they may have had that idea or something similar to that already. It may not be that, they've stolen your idea. I mean, it's very hard to sort of prove that. Or it may be, again, there's some sort of internal reason why that person on the staff,
No, it happened almost immediately. So I know it was exactly that. So
okay, well, again, I think that's I know. I'm sorry if that's happened. Obviously, that's horrible.
Yep.
But I think, again, you just have to sort of pick yourself up and dust yourself down. It's, what's that horrible cliche? It's not, it's not how you get knocked down. It's how you stand up again. That that counts. And it's.
I think you're setting yourself the hardest of all pitches. I mean, everyone wants to be a columnist, and all staff writers, they all want a column, right? Getting a column is the hardest thing in the world, really, and the chances of them to give it to somebody that they've not met, I don't want to be negative about this, but it's a pretty tough call. So I don't know what to advise, really. I mean, I would try and get familiar and write for that publication first, so they get to know you a bit. And see your writing style, to go in on day one with I want to do a column.
Well, I'm actually already writing a column for another newspaper. So.
Oh, are you? All right. Sorry, I thought that. Oh, okay. Well, if you're doing, and you can show a column, that's completely different. I thought you were just entry level, wanted to write a column.
No.
Yeah.
But if it's all right, I'm just going to if we've just got time for one more, just so that we can have another question on kind of those entry-level jobs, if that's all right, just because I know that we are out of time. But we've had a couple of questions in around kind of masters and NCTJs and, doing a BA, and just whether, I know that, Stuart, you obviously see a lot of job applications yourself, and Sue, whether, just people have asked, is there one right route? Are you going to get judged for doing one thing or the other? Like, it's obviously a bit of a minefield out there, but just any advice on what route you should take or what employers seem to be looking for?
It is. I think NCTJ is a very good route into local newspapers. A lot of them ask that almost as a prerequisite. So that's certainly a fantastic route. But not having either a master's or an NCTJ degree or being a journalist, it's difficult for me to say. But I know that some employers do value the NCTJ very highly. And it's gold standard. It's 120 words shorthand. There's all sorts of reasons why it's valued, but whether or not it puts you in a better space for all jobs is a different matter, I think.
As in, if you had anything to say?
We pretty well have it as a prerequisite. Having said that, we normally do take on 3 or 4 people a year that haven't either online or sub-editing usually. Because to be a reporter, you need shorthand. So if you haven't got that, that's a problem. But if you're coming straight from university, you have to be really special, because you're and the people we've taken on have done as well. They've just taken longer to get there. But you know, why, if I'm offered, you know, a person with an NCTJ who's developed those skills, who's learnt them, and there's another person who hasn't, they've really got to stand out for me to take them, you know, beyond the one with the NCTJ. But having said that, I think we're taking on a feature trainees this year, and I probably won't mind whether they've got an NCTJ or not. Subs, I don't always mind, and again, online, I don't always mind.
Yeah, I think I would probably echo that. Kind of, as you can kind of get a sense, it kind of very much depends on what job you're applying for. Local newspapers definitely want an NCTJ. National newspapers will definitely want, you know, something else. So just think about what kind of route you're looking to go into. I think is maybe the most important thing. But there's no set way to do it. I think the most important thing is that you've got some kind of training. That's what they're looking for. They want to know that you're not going to kind of go in and libel everyone, I think, from my perspective. But yeah, I'll pass back to you, Hilly.
Okay, I think it's time to wind up, actually, and just to say thank you very, very much to Stuart and to Sue. I think you've given sort of very quickly great kind of insight and an overview of all sorts of different ways of getting into journalism, or, you know, making your moves when you're starting out. So thank you so much. And of course also to Jem for the same, and for being such a great tech person and co-chair. Thank you. Please do sign up for the pitching workshop next week. It's very, very good. It was completely oversubscribed last time, which is why we're doing another one. I think the following week we are doing a big session with Alison Phillips, who's the editor of the Daily Mirror and our deputy chair, about the regions, what's going on in the regional world of media. So if that's of interest to you, please do come for that. And then over the summer we're going to start doing our own literary festival with journalists who are also very well-known authors talking about writing their books. Of course, all those festivals have been cancelled for the summer, so lots of writers are losing the opportunity to talk about their books and promote them. So we're going to step in there and help them out. So thank you again, really, for coming, everybody. You've asked some really good questions, and I hope you found it really useful. Do have a tweet about us if you like afterwards. It's at WiJ_UK. So thanks a lot, and hope to see you again. Bye.
Goodbye. Take care.
Thank you. Good luck with it all.